On the Great Bambino. What? On the Great Bambino. What? On the Great Bambino. Oh. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, go back to 1993 and watch The Sandlot. It's a classic little baseball movie. You know, a little feel good jump off. I was, what was I, 7 when it came out? Born in 1986, guys. So I'm not crazy old, not crazy young either. Anyway, the game I have for you right now is the game Teimour Radjabov versus Wesley So out of round 11. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I'm good. All right. If you guys are ready, we'll go ahead and take a look. But Teimour Radjabov is from Azerbaijan, which, as some of you chess aficionados are aware of, is the same place that Garry Kasparov is from. You know, they were both born in Baku, in Azerbaijan, and Teimour Radjabov's dad actually attended the school that Kasparov put on, and he's actually Teimour's coach. If you guys are ready, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have. Getting over here, bam. All right, so we have D4, knight to F6, C4, G6, knight to C3. All right, so we have D5. So we have the Grunfeld on the board. As a lot of chess players like to talk about, openings, and they talk about Najdorfs and Sicilians, and King's Indians, and Grunfeld is in that group of like highly mentionable chess openings. If you've ever been to a chess tournament, you know what I'm talking about. So we have knight to F3, bishop to G7, bishop to F4. Now this is what is it? Is it the Hungarian? I think it's the Hungarian. Let me double check. Yes, Hungarian. It's the Hungarian attack. Okay. Now just backing up a touch. Something that you see as well is Queen to B3. That's going to be the Russian attack, and also you'll see pawn takes D5, and both of those are much more heavily played than a bishop F4. But it's not a terrible variation. It's still a very legitimate, up there. It's like number 5th on a list or something like that. All right, so we have castles here, and we have E3. All right, C5. And like I was saying before, guys, when you have somewhat of a legitimate pawn center, the most common themes to try to break down somebody's center is going to be C5 or is going to be F5. All right, so we have D takes C5, queen to A5, just a very typical way to try to recover that pawn on C5. Also it prevents any of these type of movements coming. B4 trying to hold on to that pawn, which is a lot easier for white because since they do have the first move, they're kind of up, a tempo. All right, so we have rook to C1. All right, D takes C4, bishop takes C4, queen C5, and we have queen to B3. And so knight to C6, and we have castles. And believe it or not, we have a completely brand new game as of this position, as of castles on move 11. Now, it's not often that you see castles being the novelty of a game, but castles is a very rare move. No, I'm playing. It's a super common move. Like almost every single game should have a castles, but like I said, that is where we're at. This is castles. It brings us to the brand new position that we've never seen in the entirety of the world, as far as we know. All right, so we have knight to A5, queen to B5. Just asking a question to the queen because the queen is undefended. So there are a lot of moves that you'll think of when you're playing your games that come from noticing that somebody has an undefended piece, and a lot of times you can exploit it. All right, so we have queen takes C4, queen takes A5, got B6. All right, so queen to A3. All right, so rook to E8, rook F to D1, and like I was saying before, guys, either one of these rooks can move to this this square. So you want to definitely make sure that you note the correct one. So when they're on the same file, you're going to say which one moved from which square. So that rook starting on F1. It's going to be rook F to D1. And then, of course, if, this one had moved as well, it would be rook C to D1. All right, so we got queen to a6, trying to get a trade of the queens here. All right, so we got queen to b4. Now, something I want to mention in this particular position is if you were to just look at the position just based on, the quality of like the development and the opening for white and for black, you'd have white would have pretty much all of their pieces out. They have their rooks connected. Their rooks are on completely open files. So, comparing it to black's position, black's bishop still needs to get developed. This rook still needs to come into the game. This rook isn't on an open file. This queen is kind of back. This queen is more central. So just kind of looking at it at face value, it would seem that black, white is just doing considerably better, and they should have a considerable advantage. The main reason why black is actually in a better position in this position, as crazy as it sounds, is because of this bishop pair. And so everything else pretty much being equal, they have similar space. They have, black is a little bit behind in development, but white has moved the queen quite a few times. Is like I said, because you have these bishops here for black. And so, it's not always where just because somebody has a lead in development and they have a superior looking position, they actually do have a superior looking position. Now, the advantage for black is not like insanely high. But it's a slight advantage to black. And like I said, there are two different types of positions that you usually come into. They're going to be closed positions and there's going to be open positions. And in the closed positions, where we have a lot of pawns kind of blocking up the entire board, the knights are going to do a little bit better. And so when you have a knight pair, it's going to be a little bit better than a bishop pair. But in this particular position, you see that there is so much open board. Bishop comes here, this bishop is slicing down and stuff like that. So, when you're going more into an end game, the fact that you have two bishops compared to two knights, or a knight and a bishop, that's the strength of this position. So, once you develop bishop, get the rooks over into these open files and stuff like that, it's going to be very, very good. It's going to be pretty good for black here. So, all right, moving on here. All right, so we have bishop to b7, like I was saying. We have knight to e5. Right. All right, so we have rook a to c8, h3. And as you guys can see, the position that we are at now compared to a couple moves ago, black has considerably improved their position and the scope of their pieces. All right, so we have rook to c5. We have a4, just stopping any b5 moves. All right, so we got e6. All right, so knight to d3. All right, so we have queen to c4, attacking that queen there. All right, so we have queen to b5. All right, queen takes b5, knight takes b5. And if you guys want to go ahead and pause the video real quick, as black, with it being your move, try to see if you can find what Wesley So actually did in this position. I'm curious how many of you would make a certain move. So like I said, if you want to just go ahead and stop it real quick and see what you would do in this position, you catch back up with us in a second. We'll be waiting here. All right, cool. So the game that was actually played in the game was rook takes c1. And like I said, just backing up a touch here, I feel like there's some of you that would have looked at the pawn being over there looking real juicy and turned into a Yasser Sirawan, and went ahead and just snapped that off, right? Unfortunately, this is like a this is a very horribly crumbling positional error, and it is because of this move here, knight to d6, and so really at the cost of a pawn, white has gotten some very dynamic play. And so you see you have an issue in this position. You have this undefended bishop attacked, and you also have this rook attacked. So you're basically having to choose between, are you gonna just give up the bishop completely, or are you gonna lose the exchange, right? Because if you were to play something like rook to b8, trying to defend that bishop in case the knight moves, you would take the bishop on b7. The rook would take back, and you'd have rook to c8 check. And earlier, like I was mentioning, that's the power of these rooks, being on this open file. And so after bishop to f8, which is only really somewhat logical move because, you know, knight to e8 just loses the knight completely. You'd have bishop to h6, and you know there's not a good way to really defend against checkmate, you know, because of course if you have knight here to try to, you know, defend this bishop, you know, you'd see something like knight here, you know, deflecting the knight away from the defense of that and stuff. And so, you know, if we just back up here a touch, you know, after knight d6, the computer actually gives bishop to a6 as the best possible move by far. And yeah, that's just, yeah. that makes me feel bad, man. It really does, because I mean, you're looking at the situation like you're gonna have to give you're gonna have to give the rook up. Knight takes e8, and then you have knight to e5, and you see you're down a pawn, but you're up an entire exchange. So you know, really, if you're kind of thinking about it, you're up at least about a pawn or pawn and a half's worth as white, just simply because the power of these two rooks is probably at some point going to probably make you lose a piece. So if we just back up here to what was played in the game, so we had rook takes c1. So you know, Wesley saw all that because, you know, he's on a pretty high, like, you know, genius chess level, right? And so, you know, he decided that he wasn't going to go into any of that, and of course, you know, he recognized the fact that he did have that bishop, you know, that was undefended there. All right, so like I said, so we have rook takes c1, and we have rook to d8, rook to c7. You know, it's when you kind of ascend a little bit higher in the chess world, you start to get used to making you know, those zwitch and zug moves, you know, counter-attacking types of moves. So instead of just kind of randomly just moving the knight away, you know, rook to c7 is a very active move. You know, a pig on the 7th and stuff, you know, is what you call a rook that penetrates onto the 7th rank or the 2nd. All right, so we have bishop to a6, and we have knight to b4. All right, so we have bishop takes b5, pawn takes b5. And for those of you that aren't familiar with my pawn freeze concept, you know, it's this position here where that one pawn is stopping these two pawns from, you know, really advancing, especially, you know, in conjunction with the knight. So I'll just be popping that up in the top right hand corner if you guys want to take a look at that video. All right, so we have knight to h5. All right, so knight to c6, just hitting double attack on that pawn and really driving that pawn freeze point home. All right, so we have rook to d1 check, king h2 only move. All right, so we have knight takes f4. Throwing a little check real quick, so rook to c8. And so we have bishop to f8 just covering that. Pawn takes e4, king to g7, rook to a8, bishop to d6, just attacking that that undefended pawn there. You know, when you have double pawns, it's a little bit hard to, you know, protect them and stuff. So we have rook to d2. All right, so rook takes a7, rook takes f2 with check. We have king to g1, and we have bishop to c5. Being kind of cheeky, you know, because it's like, you know, of course, if you just leave the king there on g1, you got a nice little discover with most likely taking pawn here, and then following up with taking this pawn as well, just getting a little twofer real quick. All right, so we have b4, just protecting the pawn and attacking the bishop as well. So since the bishop really doesn't have any other squares, we got bishop to e3, and we have rook to a3. All right, so we have rook to f3 with check. We got king to g2. All right, we got rook to f2 with check, rook to g1, king to f3 with check. We have king to g2, rook to f2 check, and then we have king to g1, and we have a draw by repetition. We just kind of back up here. Actually, if we just keep going a second, you know, you can always do, you know, of course, after the 3-4 repetition, it's automatically a draw. But, you know, if we were to go back to the beginning, you know, the issue that black has here is the fact that this bishop is attacked. And so you kind of have to go into this, you know, this repetition here, because, you know, either taking the rook here to f3 or to e2, you know, that's the only way to really just continue to guard the bishop. So, you know, if we did have just kind of a slight change in that rook to e2, you'd see rook to f1, and then you'd see rook to f2. And if you were trying to, like, maybe get away from doing the same thing, you know, you have king to e1, you know, bishop to c1 would attack that rook. You see rook to d3, and you know, something like rook to h2 and h4. And so, you know, you can go on playing. It's still triple zeros, as Maurice Ashley would say, but like, man, it's triple zeros. Like, you know, he's always like, it's triple zeros. Anyway, that's funny stuff. But yeah, so you pretty much have, a little something like this. But if we just kind of looked at a side variation, some of you guys might have been thinking like, well, why can't I just go king to h2? And it seems like it sidesteps everything. You would have this would actually be pretty nasty. I don't know. Let me just give a second and see if you guys can see what I'm looking at right here. What's a good move in this position? I think a lot of you guys will be looking like, oh man, this looks real juicy, right? And you looking, let's see, king bishop to g1 with check. So the problem is you've discovered an attack on this rook, but you've also checked the king here, right? And so, as you guys know, there's only 3 different ways to parry a check. Move the king out of the way, take the offending piece, or block. And since the bishop is right up here against the king, the only option is to either move the king or take the bishop. And so any one of those, whether you move here, or take the piece, this rook is dropping next. And that's going to be a very hard game to win. So you see, like, king takes g1, rook takes a3. And so, like I said, that is the round 11 game between Teimour Radjabov and Wesley So. And it did end in a draw. And so if you guys have any other games you want me to take a look at, do some analysis on, let me know. I will do that for you if I get a little bit of time here. I got a couple more hours left in the night. So if anybody gets in and lets me know, let me know, and I will try to get you hooked up. Also, I got my little donation stuff here. If anybody wants to donate to the channel, feel 100% free. And if you want to, just leave me a note and I'll give you a personal shout out and a thank you for, just throwing a little donation. Just, kind of helps me, stay a little bit more focused on being able to, follow these tournaments. I definitely like to do a lot more games from these tournaments and stuff like that. So I appreciate you guys stopping by. And like I said, subscribe and like. You guys have been killing it recently. And I really appreciate all of y'all out there in the world. And I will see you guys next time. I appreciate it.